Hey guys, thanks for watching. I've been talking a lot on social media and in our client meetings about making sure your investments match your risk tolerance. And a lot of the problems people have is they don't know how much risk should they be taking. And I thought I'd go through a little example of a tool we use and a lot of other advisors use as well. And something is one way of figuring out what your risk is and very precisely mapping how does your risk of your portfolio match you. And with this tool, you can see on the screen, we have a imaginary person, Chris Sample here, and we use a tool called Riskalyze. And what Riskalyze allows us to do is use a questionnaire that is online, either a simple one or a complex one, that more precisely figures out what is your budget for risk. And so Chris has already gone through his questionnaire and he's identified that his risk score, or his speed limit, if you will, is a 49. So on this scale at Riskalyze, the scale goes from 1 to 99. And so if you're in a checking account, that's a 1. The money's not going to go up and down on a periodic basis. If you have something more along the lines of like Tesla Motors stock, it's going to be probably closer to a 99, a very, very high risk. But for our purposes, most people are somewhere in between 25 and 80. And the reason for that is the bond market has a risk score on this scale of around 25 to 30. And the S&P 500 has a risk score of about 77. So Mr. Sample here is somewhere in the middle of about a 49. And he's a 50-year-old. And he is expecting to retire in the year 2035. And like a lot of people, his portfolio, he's told us that he's got a 401k from his former employer. And he, like most people, about 2/3 of the people have all their money in a 401k in a target date retirement fund. And in this case, he's chosen the Vanguard fund, and it's the 2035 retirement fund. So the idea is set it and forget it. I'm retiring in 2035. No problem. I'm one and done. Didn't have to get too complicated or go through a lot of stress in figuring out which funds to invest in. So that's the simple solution for an awful lot of people. And when we look at that fund, he's got 100% of his money in that 401k is in that fund, and that fund has a risk of 62 on our scale. And that may not matter if he's super, super patient and he can tolerate a lot of risk, and he's just going to completely ignore it, and his risk score is actually not a 49, then he should sit still. And if his risk score really is accurate, then he's going to want to maybe dial something back down to closer to where his risk budget really is. So what we might consider doing is putting something together that gets a little more close, a proposed portfolio will, if you will, to his risk score, so that his investments potentially can match up between his budget for risk and then how the investments themselves might behave. And to put this a little bit more in perspective, what does this all mean when you're looking at these risk scores? For his example, his 62 portfolio, in any 6-month random period, there's about a 95% probability, according to Riskalyze, that his portfolio will be somewhere between down 12.95% or up 18.5%. So that's kind of the range of normality. That's the normal range of expectation in any 6-month window. That's what his $250,000 portfolio could do. Now, theoretically, over time, he might be able to get 5.55% returns, and it's a good expense ratio. It's a super cheap fund that he's in, but that's kind of the annual return. But it can have good years and bad years. And plus, there's a 2.5% chance it could do better than this. And there's a 2.5% chance, according to Riskalyze, they could do worse than this. But that's kind of what a 62 is. So what you'll see when you go to like a 49 model, if you go to something that's a little bit more conservative, you might be able to improve upon the downside risk of that. So in this case, you see the range is only -9 to maybe a +16 on this example. But even if he sits still and he does nothing different, according to Riskalyze, it says here he's got about an 82% probability of being able to meet his goals. And his goals are, he's got $250, he's got $1,500 a month going in, so he's maxing out his 401k, he's retiring in 2035. And then at that point, he's going to want to pull out $3,500 a month from that. So, and he's going to live to, it looks like age 90. So if we make his age 95, that's going to change things a little bit, but he still looks pretty decent. He's got about a 68% probability of the money lasting till 95. If he decides to have a life expectancy of 90, it's more like an 82% probability. But what we might do is we might say, well, could we improve upon that? And if there's any way we can improve upon the probabilities according to this tool, then maybe that's something we might consider. And so we might say, what other proposed portfolios might make a difference? Could we potentially increase the probability of success here? And in this case, we were able to increase the probability of success a little bit. And what that does is that may buy an early retirement or potentially a little bit more on the monthly withdrawal. But the key thing here is to make sure that your budget for risk here and your investments themselves, ideally, they should match and they should be able to fulfill your goals. It doesn't do you any good to have something you're super comfortable with that fails you in the long run. And at the same time, you got to be comfortable enough to stick with it. So have a great day, guys. I really enjoy all your comments, and I look forward to hearing what your thoughts are.